What is up, everybody? Welcome to Omnic Lab. This is a podcast that focuses on the strategy in the game of Overwatch. And we're going to do it just like we're in a lab, even if things blow up in our faces in those crazy flasks. And this week, it is episode number 68. And I'm your host, Rob May. And joining me, as always, is Andres Gomez, all the way in the great south of the United States. And then we also have Mr. Arrge coming in hot from... Where are you from? I didn't actually ask you pre-show, sorry.
I'm from the hydraulic press land, also known as Finland.
Awesome.
Yeah, buddy. So we got 3 different countries on the show this week, so I'm really hyped about that. But in reality, regardless if he's coming in from Finland or not, we're going straight to Hanamura to visit the eldest of the Shimada clan, Hanzo, in yet another Going Deep episode. We're going to be bringing Arrge on here because he's a top 500 Hanzo specialist on the show. And if you guys are ready, let's just string up the bows, cork the sake, and wall climb behind enemy lines so we can scattershot a flurry of questions right your way. But before we do, let's get to know Arrge a little bit. We'll jump into some news, and then we'll bounce back into Hanzo, and that's how we'll do the show this week. Sound good?
Sounds good.
So, Andres, kick us off with the interview here.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who are wondering in the live show, no, Arrge is not a ghost. He just didn't have his webcam available, so we're having to use the stock Skype little guy. So
glamour shot.
Yeah, like some of you are saying, face reveal coming soon. He's a mysterious man. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Arrge? What got you into gaming? What brought you into Overwatch eventually? What do you like about it?
So I got addicted to video games when I was like 5 years old. I think my first game that I was really hardcore playing was Lego Racers 1.
Oh, nice.
Which I got from a cereal box. But yeah, I mostly played, the games that I played the most were World of Warcraft, of course, RuneScape, Diablo 2, and then my first real FPS game was Counter-Strike Source, and then I played a lot of TF2, and then I moved on to PlanetSide 2. But there was some other FPS games. Yeah, that was an amazing game. I like to just go behind the enemy lines. Like, there's 3 factions.
Yeah.
I would go to a fight where it was the 2 enemy factions fighting, and then I would just pick off people from both sides with a sniper until I ran out of ammo.
So dirty.
Yeah, it's good XP and a lot of those currency things that you need to get weapons.
Very nice.
Yeah, then I started playing Overwatch in the open beta, and I actually wasn't going to buy it, but all my friends bought the game, and then I had no one to play with other games, so I just bought the game.
You're kind of forced to be able to keep playing with your friends.
Yeah.
Overwatch beta Bible thump.
There you go. There you have it. Overwatch stealing all the friends.
Yeah, but then I accidentally got addicted. When Season 1 came out, I slowly became a Hanzo main as well.
The key Hanzo mains.
Unpopular opinion in season 1, but I'm glad that you stuck with it because you are really good with Hanzo. For those of you who have not seen him play, he is an insane Hanzo. He'll make the craziest shots, and you have like this habit of flicking shots that is just like, it blows my mind sometimes. What do you like about Hanzo? What do you like about the hero?
Well, the best thing about Hanzo is, of course, the ability to one-shot pretty much any hero in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the hero usually makes both teams mad, which is a plus.
It has a unique ability to do that, yeah.
Yeah.
The best way to make both teams mad is by a nonchalant Hanzo pick with a nice mellow tone. Like icing on the cake. Oh, man. So, Arrge, when you played TF2, was there any particular roles that you really felt like you jived with, or is it more of like just a game you like to play at that time?
I was pretty much only playing Spy. My record was actually getting like 100 kills without dying on Spy, but that was on a noob server.
Oh, nice.
Do you want to enlighten those who have no idea what the Spy does, just so they can realize that you went from one rage machine inducing monster to the next?
Yeah, the Spy is pretty much a hero. Like, there's different weapons you can use in TF2. And on Spy, I was using this dagger that gives you pretty much triple your max HP when you backstab someone. And then I was also using a clock that makes you invisible when you get hit, and it looks like you actually died even though you didn't. Like, it drops a fake body on the floor. So the tactic was to just run towards the enemies, then I get shot and die but don't actually die. Then I go behind the enemy lines, and then I just keep backstabbing people and get shot in the back. But since I always get my HP back when I kill someone, I'm just like tanking all the shots.
Oh,
it seems that you like playing the heroes that are, yeah. I was about to say that you like playing the heroes that infuriate other people, just backstabbing people, tucking them out.
I actually have a kill counter on my dagger. It's 1,150 kills.
Oh, nice.
Dagger right now.
That's pretty cool.
That's so sick. Oh, man. All right. Well, now that we've established that Arrge is basically the scum of the earth, and that's how you get Type 500, we can end the show. I'm just kidding.
No.
No. Just kidding.
It's okay. It's okay. You can mess with other people as long as you're good. You know, you're just showing your skills.
As long as you show off in your ally team's like, oh, this guy's pretty good at what he's doing. then you're safe, right? All right. Well, not to kind of deflect the train here, but I think we got some really cool news. And guys, I apologize. I had a work trip for English camp last week, and I know that there are at least one of you out there that wants to hear me talk about Mercy this week. So, luckily, even though I missed the PTR update for when we were talking about the initial huge changes, Deathblow had me covered last week. So thanks to High Noon for filling on my shoes and Andres for scheduling that. But there are a 2.0 adjustment on August 29th. They rolled out a new adjustment for Valkyrie. And a lot of the Mercy players have a lot of mixed reviews. I haven't really heard any of the players saying the same thing. So here you go. The Caduceus Blaster that was previously buffed with Valkyrie used to grant three things: infinite ammo, fast fire rate, infinite ammo meaning that you don't have to reload, and would also increase the damage. So damage, fire rate increase, and infinite ammo. And now it's basically just fire rate, which seems pretty lame to me. The next one is the hover. So the ability, basically, hover turns into beast god mode fly. And now the flight speed has been decreased to 9, and it was 11. So you're going to be flying a little bit slower. Now, these numbers seem fairly arbitrary because we don't really know what the internal system is for flight. And I've not really seen anything when they talk about where Farah is as far as like how fast the flight goes when you hit the rocket boosters or how much the flight goes when you're just moving around in the air with the hover jets or gravity. So I feel like the flight adjustment from what I've been seeing is not as significant as people were initially fearful of, but the damage reduction on the blaster, or rather the damage reversion and the fire rate reversion, is kind of like removing both of those is just making quote unquote buffing Battle Mercy with Valkyrie not good anymore, in my opinion. Andres, Arrge, what do you guys think here as far as adjustments on these two particular Valkyrie buffs that were adjusted? I'll pass it to our guest first.
Yeah, I was about to say, go ahead, Arrge. What's your opinion on these changes, by the way?
I'm actually, I think it's a good change that the pistol deals less damage. I feel like healers should only focus on healing. Like there should be a clear role for the Mercy to just heal. Like for me, example, so I can stay in the fight, deal the damage.
Okay. What about the flight thing? Did you jump on PTR and test this? I know it was like really soon. Like this is what, like 2 days ago that it hit PTR.
I didn't test it on PTR. I like to wait until the changes hit the live server, but I feel like the ultimate is really good against dive. At least you can just escape the dive really easily.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell right now, right? Like, this is such a huge rework. She's losing her mass resurrect, and then she's getting this completely new thing that we haven't even see the potential of Valkyrie, right? And it's still going through some iterations. You can definitely tell that Blizzard right away toned it down a little bit because it might have been a little too much. So yeah, it just looks like they're trying to find a sweet spot so that the ultimate feels strong, feels useful. Mercies don't feel like they got jibbed out of their super mass resurrect, which is one of the strongest ultimates in the game. But yeah, like Arrge said, like it's just a matter of waiting to see when it comes out live, seeing what state it comes out and what people can do with it. I'm excited to see that new Mercy. It's gonna change the dynamic a lot when you play the hero.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like you guys did a really good job covering this despite my absence, Andres. So props to you guys. But like, I felt like in most cases, a lot of players are not really talking about the regeneration passive adjustment. And I feel like that could potentially be, besides the pistol change, is actually the second most oppressive thing that they're going to have to balance. In that balancing this ability as being something that sticks around or is just not part of Valkyrie is a huge deal to me, because you're able to basically have your own healing aura outside of Lucio constantly. So your regeneration passive doesn't need to wait for you to stop taking damage. You can actually go straight in and deal the damage. So basically, now they're saying you can be aggressive and you can have infinite ammo in which to do so. So you can do that. But you're not going to basically do what Arrge was like afraid of here, which is jumping in, having a blitz of damage, getting the nano boost to on top of that, right? And then also having increased fire rate. Personally, I think that the increase of fire rate is basically just good. Like, if they could make it a little bit faster than Diva would be cool, but I can see why it's an issue. But like, it's kind of a weird thing where I'm not quite sure how I feel about it because I haven't got a chance to test the new, like the second round of changes yet. But the Guardian Angel speed is nuts. Like, I was watching Gale play this, and holy crap. You thought GA was fast to escape there. You are like almost levels of Genji dash now. So you can like fly up in the air, dash in, pew, 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 dash out. And then the other thing that's really cool is basically you can dash out with Valkyrie to escape. And while you're dashing out, your regeneration is going to go up. And then you can spin around and have this insane range for your damage boost while your allies go back in. So you can basically play hyper safe without needing the res and play in an aggressive team fight style. So it's basically separating you from the team while allowing you to both survive, like healing yourself as well as spacing yourself, and healing your allies in a group. And that will basically just enable like Zenyatta's and Lucio's to be even more aggressive. So it's really, really cool in how they've adjusted this change. But that's all the piece I was going to say about this, and we can move on. So I've said my piece about Mercy. If you guys want to talk more, you can jump on our Discord. We don't really have a new update. Oh, go ahead, Arrge. Sorry.
I actually didn't know that the Ultimate also doesn't like stops the or like makes it so that you don't stop regenerating HP when you get hit.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part
pretty much
of it.
Makes
it's scary.
That it pretty much makes Mercy unkillable, especially if you have the Ana grenade on you.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, this ultimate is crazy because it makes you incredibly mobile. It makes you regenerate health. It makes you a little stronger. You don't shoot as fast now as previously, but you still shoot a little harder. Like it hits a little harder. I like the idea that like if Mercy is left alone with this, she actually has a chance to fight back, to be like, oh crap, nobody's helping me. I can actually help myself and just get the kill and then like go join my team super quick. Or it also allows Mercy to get really aggressive with her team, and when everyone does the dive, she can literally follow the dive as well. I like the change of reducing the fire rate though, because I think that the increased fire rate incentivizes too much you just going all out offensive, right? And Mercy still is a support hero even when she's a Valkyrie form. You still can not nano boost, but damage boost and heal a massive amount of people because it now chains to other people. Yeah. So I like that it gives you both options, right?
You can still nano her. Like you can still do the nano. It's just not going to do as much as it did prior. So it's still worth testing and trying out.
But yeah,
let's save the rest of our news and move on to the Hanzo stuff. Okay, so we're gonna jump in and talk some Hanzo. So the first question we always like to ask Arrge is basically the role in which you like to fill as Hanzo. So this is like offensive, defensive, flanker. What kind of jobs do you like to fill beyond just like the Blizzard, stereotype of defense and the team stereotype of just DPS, right? So what is more of a dynamic way of kind of describing what role you fill as when you pick your Hanzo?
Well, it depends a lot on the team composition and also on the teamwork that the team has. But on attack, it's pretty straightforward. You just try to get picks. It's like getting 1 or 2 picks before the team fight even starts is pretty much a free win in the team fight. And if the enemy team is even diving on defense, like when they are defending, they might still try to dive. Then I just usually stand behind my team's support heroes, and then just try to scatter the dive heroes when they go for the supports. But I feel like the tactics change a lot depending on if you're playing on NA or EU, or if you're playing on low ranks. You really have to adjust how your team is playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Hanzo compared to Soldier or compared to Tracer, for example, what does he bring to the table that those heroes can bring, and maybe what doesn't he bring that those heroes can?
Well, Soldier obviously has the healing ability, so he can heal himself and the team, so he needs less help from the healers, which makes it easier for the healers to keep the tanks alive and the rest of the team. But Hanzo, on the other hand, has an easier time getting to a high ground, and especially if the other team doesn't have any heroes that can contest you on the high ground, then it's pretty much a free win in the fight once again, especially if the team is playing defensively.
Of course.
But
yeah, Could you can we circle back around talking about adjusting to your tier play? Because that's something that I always like to talk through, especially with when we get top 500 players, we have no shortage of advanced tips. The thing that really seems to be something that a lot of people are always asking is more of the basics. Like, what is your bread and butter as Hanzo? Like, maybe your ability or kind of your breakdown of like how you want to adjust and maybe like each tier, what's something you want to focus on. And you can use generalities is fine, but like we want to make sure that some people might be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know May could actually turn the wall from horizontal to vertical, you know, or I can break my own wall, stuff like that, like the super basic stuff.
Well, let's say if I'm getting pocketed by a Mercy, then I'm usually playing the tank role at the same time. I'm just standing on the front lines. But the best position to be with a pocket Mercy against a dive especially is to be on the high ground. So that way when the enemy team's divers go for you, it's much easier to stay alive since you can just jump down while being shot, which gives you additional time to live. So you get your HP back since you're getting healed by the Mercy. You can shoot at the dive heroes at the same time. So, but like if you don't have a Mercy pocketing you and the enemy team is clearly focusing you, then you really should just stand far back, especially if your team is not going to help you. It might feel a bit weird not going for shots and just waiting for the enemy team to initiate, but that's the only thing you can do. Otherwise, if you just overextend, you're going to die and be completely useless anyways.
Makes sense. And I think position is a big part of like knowing your team and knowing what you can do, right? Like being able to read if your team is there to support you and it can be really aggressive, or if your team is not really paying much attention to you and you have to readjust your play to be a little more conservative, maybe be a little sneakier with your shots. Like you said, not being too aggressive since you know you're not gonna have a Mercy that's constantly babysitting you throughout the game. Let me ask you something about some of the heroes. What do you think are heroes that Hanzo counters really well, and what are heroes that maybe give you a little bit of trouble, where if the enemy team is playing them, you might be forced to switch or really change your playstyle?
A really good Widow is maybe the biggest threat, especially if you're defending. But other than that, maybe D.Va. Like D.Va can just completely shut Hanzo down. Mm-hmm. Hold right click till the Hanzo is dead. So.
And the thing about Hanzo is that you can see his projectile coming, right? With D.Va, it tends to be easy. You can just kind of time it. Even if you're looking at the Hanzo, you can see when he releases the arrow, and you can just matrix him right there.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you really have enough time to start right-clicking after the arrow gets shot, unless it's really long range. But the basic Hanzo versus D.Va in medium to long range is that you try to time the matrix, save it as much as possible while still protecting your team from the arrows.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
so if you
people, people
go ahead.
think that like Tracer, for example, is a hard counter to Hanzo, but it all just comes down to how good you are with Hanzo and how good is the Tracer player. For example, Upi is a Finnish Tracer player who I have played a lot against. He's pretty much one of the only Tracers that can actually win a 1v1 against me reliably.
Interesting.
But
I've actually heard from like some good Hanzo players that they pick Hanzo to counter Tracers sometimes.
Yeah, especially if the Tracer is not going for you, if she doesn't know that you're going for the Tracer, then you can go for an easy scatter right after a blink. But if it's a Hanzo versus Tracer fight, then it gets kind of sketchy. For
It's kinda
example,
sketchy.
yeah, it's really interesting because the way a high-level Hanzo versus Tracer fight usually goes is that I shoot one arrow and she blinks once, and then I ready a scatter arrow, and then she blinks again, and then I go for the scatter because she expects me to shoot again, but I don't. I just wait until she blinks the second time. So,
You blast her toenails off.
Yeah, but then she might actually just blink twice in a row to dodge the scatter. Like it's like a meta game that gets more complicated.
It starts becoming a like a little mind game, right? Like, is it gonna blink once or twice? Like, Tracer's already expecting you to do that second shot, so she pre-blinks, but then she's gonna pre-blink, so you have the scatter ready. But if she knows that you have the scatter ready, then she blinks an extra time, and now she's like slightly ahead. You might miss your scatter. I actually really love those kind of like dueling mechanics in Overwatch. I feel like in every hero, you can go through these sequences to kind of like lure out their cooldowns or to dodge their cooldowns. And usually if you do them well, you end up winning the 1v1s. It's a matter of, who can be one step ahead of the other person. And I think with Hanzo, you definitely have to be paying a lot of attention with that, because aside of your wall climb, you're not incredibly mobile, right? Like, if you don't have a high ground to escape to and stuff, you're kind of like a McCree without a roll. You're kind of just walking really slowly to places.
Yeah, but that's why you should position yourself in a way that you can always have an escape route to a high ground and stuff like that. That's actually the other way to deal with a Tracer, is just climb to a high ground, and then the Tracer is helpless.
Yeah, she has to go around the world to probably get where you are.
It's a little sad.
And if you're on a high ground, then she might try something cool, like doing a double blink to get where you are. And then you're already at a huge advantage, since she had to waste 2 blinks.
So I like this talk about like matching up against one other hero, because like the more that I've been playing, even if I'm playing support, like on a Mercy or an Honor or something, for example, I feel like throughout the game, kind of in the first couple minutes of the first round, you start kind of like getting this. I mean, if you're on a comfort pick, or you're on a hero that you're like very, very comfortable on, and you kind of just know where you should be positioning and how to like dodge shots and whatnot, you kind of start picking up on the meta game of like not just like the ult economy, but like kind of learning other players' style behavior on a hero. So for example, like you're talking about a Tracer, it's like, okay, is this Tracer that I'm used to playing, does he usually go for, the double blink and then a single blink, or does he usually just go blink blink and wait for me to get my scatter? Like, what are those things you kind of learn as a matchup that you develop, right? Because in top 500, you guys are playing against the same dudes over and over and over again, and you're like, I know how this guy's going to play, and I'm going to play better than him. And the other guy's trying to do the same thing. He's like, okay, so he's going to save scatter because I heard him on Omnic Lab. He's going to wait for that second blink, and he's going to scatter the snot out of me. And so I'm going to do double blink, and I'm going to dodge it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but like then you could just instead scatter right after the second blink, and then the Tracer will go back to the way of blinking twice after the first shot.
Yeah, exactly.
To dodge the scatter, and then you could
it's
just
like
save your scatter
power.
there. But Tracer is like a simple version of fighting against a Genji. Like when you're fighting against a Genji, then it gets even more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I've read a little bit about kind of like game strategy theory and stuff, and like so some of this theory gets used to design a lot of these games. And the way that a lot of these games are designed to work is you have an ability, right? Then you insert into the game certain counter to that ability. But you also give the option of the first person who's doing the ability to maybe outsmart and counter the counter to the ability. And eventually you get all these levels, and at like the 4th level, basically to counter the ability is to basically just do the ability as like you normally would do it, because your opponent is expecting you to do all this other fancy stuff. If you just like outright just like do the ability, then it's kind of like a counter to the counter kind of thing. And it's a cyclical thing, right? Like it never ends. It's always about who can be one step ahead of the other person, which I think is really cool. But let's move on a little bit, and I want to ask a little question from our community over here, which I think is the elephant in the room. I think one of the hardest things to do with Hanzo is definitely aim your shots and hit your shots. Unlike other heroes in the game, Hanzo does require a certain bit of practice to be able to be really effective with that. Kind of like the Genji shurikens. You can't just like pick him up and expect to be hitting all of your shots kind of thing. So here's the question from Switch Fox. Is it better to flick your shots or track and lead shots toward the head? How do you practice your shots? Do you have any aiming tips with Hanzo?
Well, the flick shots are always going to be inconsistent the further away the enemy hero is. So at the same time, tracking is going to be harder the closer the enemy is, because you have to move your mouse faster. So it's not really a good idea to try to track someone if he's in melee range. So that's when you should go for the flick shots. But at the same time, for example, if I'm fighting against a Pharah, even at medium to long range, I usually flick my shots every time. I try to shoot right after the Pharah changes direction and just flick to that direction where she's going. But
would you say the flick is a little bit more of a micro, like what's it called, micro correction type flick rather than like a large sweeping motion?
It kind of depends on how close the enemy is, how fast the enemy is moving.
So I've seen you do some of the flicks, and they look kind of impressive. Sometimes it looks like the way that you flick, like you're not gonna hit your target, because or at least this was my analysis when I watched you play. Like you were very attentive, like you said, when the enemy was changing direction, and as soon as he would change direction, you would do a flick towards that direction. Sometimes the flick would go way past the hero, but I think like the thing that you do really well is that you release the arrow at the right time. So even if your flick goes a little bit past your target, you've released the arrow right at the right second for that thing to like go in the direction you were meaning to. So it's really interesting watching you flick, because sometimes it looks like you aim like past your target, but yet you still are hitting them in the heads. It's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's a muscle memory thing. I actually start the flick pretty much at the same time as I release the arrow to try and get the crosshair to move a bit to the direction of the enemy just before I release the arrow. So if the target is moving really fast, then I might do a really wide flick that goes way past the enemy dude, but I'm going to release the arrow the middle of the flick, as you said. But it's just like the further away from my crosshair the target is, the faster I flick. So it looks like I'm flicking past the target, but
you're like, yeah,
releasing the arrow.
You're releasing it a lot sooner.
I've actually slowed some gameplay, like watched it at 10% speed, and about, let's say, 33% of my flicks I actually just release the arrow before the flick even starts.
Like just a micro movement of flick and you release.
Yeah, like technically 1/3 of my flick shots I actually release the arrow before I even start flicking. So it's pretty much useless flick there, but it's like just a muscle memory thing I can't get rid of,
to look fancy.
Yeah.
But I truly do think that the secret in hitting Hanzo shots, and I'm no expert, but just from like watching a lot of Hanzos and from trying it myself from time to time, is that release, right? Like the release of the arrow. You really have to get used to releasing the arrow at the right times in the right positions, because it's not like a hit scan hero that you just put your crosshair on somebody and shoot and you hit him, right? Like with this one, you have to take into account your distance. You have to take into account where the enemy might be able to go, like where you think is he gonna escape through this hallway, or is he gonna go right, is he gonna go left? You kind of have to gauge that a little bit. Do you have any practice routine, or you basically just play a lot of Hanzo and competitive until you got the hang of it? Or would you go into the training mode, or create like a custom training with Anas or something?
Well, you can't really practice predicting against bots. That's
true.
why I recommend always sadly the only place to really practice hitting shots with Hanzo is competitive mode, because it's real players move completely different compared to bots. But like, for example, let's say the enemy is running down a hallway, like you said, and he has the option to go left or right. The best thing is to wait until he chooses one direction and then go for the shot, because then you know that like if he starts turning left, he's most likely not going to suddenly start going to the right instead anymore. So it's a reliable shot at that point.
Yeah, it has to come down to the leading again, right? Like that's the whole reason you wait for them to move and then flick that direction beyond, because what you're trying to do is you can't hit where your mouse is going to predict like a normal hit scan, or like you would with McCree, for example. You can't just flick to where the head will be. You have to actually flick further so that when you release, the arrow can travel and hit there, like you were talking. But yeah, I think we talked and beat this one into the ground. So if you guys need some more tips, please ask in a stream. You can head over that. It's ARRGE on twitch.tv. But let's talk about
by the way, one more thing. So getting pocketed by Mercy means that you can move a lot more closer to the enemies, since you can just tank all the damage. That's when Hanzo really shines, because you don't actually have to lead the target. You can just hit every single shot.
You're reducing the total travel time.
It becomes a race, pretty much. You're trying to kill the enemy team faster than they can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
if you're good at dodging the enemy fire, then it's just like you can permanently tank all the damage the enemy team is throwing at you.
Not to mention you hit like a truck with a boost behind you.
Mm-hmm.
You actually get you get 40% ultimate charge from one scatter if you're damage boosted by a Mercy.
Wow.
And the Mercy also gets 16%.
So let me ask you an honest question here. How often are you getting pocketed by Mercies in your games? Because that doesn't happen often in mine.
Well, I was pretty much only playing with one Mercy main since season 1 to like season 3 or season 4.
There you go.
But then we stopped playing together, so I became a solo queue Hanzo main for a while. It's like a completely different game.
Yeah, pro tip for all the Hanzo mains out there: find a Mercy friend and be nice to them.
I got you covered, team. Also, if you don't want to get pocketed, you can always just pair up with a Zenny and just be like, hey, shoot this guy. I'm like, all right, gotcha. Another 50%. Or 30, I guess it's 30% now, because Zenny is too strong. But let's go ahead.
That's also another good tip is that if someone is discorded, like a 200 HP enemy is discorded and you're getting damage boosted, then one body shot arrow is actually a one-shot kill.
It's good enough, yeah. That's the dream. That's the dream of every sniper. Be boosted by a Mercy and have Discord on their target. Like, I feel like Widows daydream about that moment.
Or you could also just get nano boosted and damage boosted for even more damage.
Well, you got to be careful because you're going to get reported for being boosted or boosting. So
Hey,
You can't be doing too much boosting.
you're boosted all the way up. All right, let's talk about Sonic Arrow. We covered a little bit of scatter. So I'm going to weave this in with one of our community questions here that comes from Excalper from PlayStation 4. He asks, when you use the Sonic Arrow, are you basically using it on cooldown in order to grant the vision always as much as you can? Or are you kind of saving it for specific areas or specific engagements so that you have vision in that case? Because the cooldown's really long. It's like, what, 20 seconds? Let me check. 20-second cooldown on Sonic Arrow with a 10-meter radius around that initial arrow, and it travels and follows whatever target's struck, including moving terrain.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of making a guide for Hanzo about how to utilize it's called like pre-game time when you're setting up your defenses. Pretty much everyone just AFKs there, doesn't do anything, but on Hanzo, you should shoot a sonic arrow straight up at the enemy team spawn like 10 seconds before the match starts. And then it will land right when the match starts. It will last 10 seconds, and then you already have a new sonic arrow up. And the same thing you can do in the middle of the game. Like, let's say you win a team fight, your sonic arrow is off cooldown. Just shoot it straight up, and it will land when the enemy team is coming back.
That's a cool tip.
Then you
go and stand in front of the door.
Yeah, pretty much like on front of the door, maybe not like directly on front of the door. Plus points if you shoot it somewhere where the enemy team will walk. So maybe you get a free headshot. It won't be a kill since you can't fully judge the arrow.
I've seen that happen
dirty.
though. I remember that used to be a thing Hanzo's like did for a little bit, where they would just stand in front of the spawn and shoot a bunch of arrows like into the sky and then run away. And when the enemy team was coming out, sometimes the arrows would fall straight on their heads and get like a kill. It's probably like one of the most infuriating feelings if you're just like on the enemy team. But that's a really good tip, doing it with the scatter though, especially if you time it right. You get to see what all the enemy team heroes are before they see you, and then you also have the cooldown up again when they're trying to do a push.
It also works with scatter arrow. Like I have a spot on Anubis when you're defending the first point. When the enemy team comes up the stairs from their spawn, there's this about 90-degree angle where you can just shoot a scatter straight up like 14 seconds before the match starts. Let's say, I guess 10 seconds, since the enemy team is coming from the spawn, it will take like 4 seconds. Since it lands on a 90-degree angle, it will just hit someone the back when they walk out from the spawn.
Nice.
Like there's so many cool spots you can figure out with scatters.
You got to put these up on your YouTube channel so we can look it up, because I'm definitely a big Hanzo fan. Like, it's my favorite character in the game. One of my most played in quick play, but definitely not in comp, unfortunately, because I'm a support guy. But I played Hanzo in free for all this weekend, or this like 2 days ago, and I didn't drop a game. It was awesome. It was one-shotting Doomfists that were getting way too aggressive because of the flick shots. When they get really close and you dodge it, just like pull the arrow back and shoot him in the dome, and then scatter arrow at somebody who's trying to play Mercy. Is hilarious. But yeah, so can you kind of go back and talk about like where regionally you're trying to put them on the map when you're not doing the fancy 10-second stalling?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about like the fancy uses of scatter, and those are nice to have. But during the fight, during like when everything's unraveling, how do you usually use Sonic Arrow? Do you try to stick it to one of the tanks? Do you try to just once you see where the enemy team is deciding to do their push, do you kind of like shoot it in that direction so your team has vision? Are there any like rules of thumb you use with it, or like Rob said, do you basically just use it on cooldown, or there are specific situations where you're like, okay, I should use not scatter but Sonic right here?
Mm, Usually, if the enemy team has any shield heroes like Reinhardt, Winston, you should always shoot the Sonic Arrow on the top half of the Reinhardt shield. And especially if you have a Pharah in your team, the Reinhardt is going to angle his shield a bit up. So when the Reinhardt is trying to block shots from the Pharah who is there, then the Reinhardt decides to drop his shield for a bit to back up or to throw a fire strike. The Sonic Arrow will pretty reliably land on the Reinhardt's head. It's just instant 250 damage. And then you can at the same time go for a scatter, like put a Sonic Arrow on the top half of the shield, ready a scatter, and when the Reinhardt drops his shield, then you can just go for a scatter plus Sonic headshot at the same time.
Wait, so let me get this straight. You're saying you put the Sonic Arrow on top of his shield, and when he drops the shield, the arrow falls on his head?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know that
it's
was
only when
possible.
you like lift the shield up though, right? It's not when
Yeah,
it's like
that's
this
why
way. It's here.
That's why it works the best when you have a Pharah in your team as well, because the Reinhardt will usually be angling the shield a bit up to block shots from the rockets.
Does this work with other, like with his regular arrow, or it's only with the scatter?
Oh, it's only with Sonic Arrow.
Oh, yeah, not scatter, sorry, Sonic. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I definitely did not know that. Does this also work with the Zarya shield, do you know?
Yeah, it works with Zarya shield, but it's like really unlikely that you're going to hit the shot.
Yeah, it's only 2
and
seconds.
at the same time you're going to give like 25% charge to the Zarya when you shoot at the shield.
Right.
So it's not really valued. But for example, Winston Bubble, it works pretty well on Winston Bubble as well, because you can shoot the Sonic Arrow top of the bubble and then go for a scatter on the bubble. Since you're doing a scatter, it's pretty much going to destroy the shield when you hit the scatter. So you can time it right when the Winston is under the Sonic Arrow.
Interesting.
Huh.
Yeah, that's pretty advanced. That's good to hear. I didn't know that little trick.
Because I knew that if you stick your Sonic Arrow into like a Reaper or into a Tracer, wherever they may be, there's some like, I can't remember, I think it's called Defend the House on YouTube. They do like a Mythbusters series for like random interactions in games. And they had like the most recent Overwatch one was talking about Sonic Arrow. And it basically had like a Tracer below a Reaper on Volskaya at the high ground. And what happens, you shoot a Sonic Arrow into the chest of the Reaper, and then he phases out, and it basically removes the debuff of the arrow. And so the arrow pops out and lands right on the head of the Tracer, insta-kills her.
Interesting.
And the same thing works out if you, because like what he would do is he switched the positions where Reaper's down there and Tracer's up there, but Tracer's not actually in the line of sight. So what happens is Tracer's like 2 frames back. She blinks once and into the same spot where the Reaper was, gets shot in the chest, and then rewinds, and the same result happens with the arrow being removed out of the time warp and dropping onto the Reaper's head. So it's really, really cool that this actually translates over to tanks, because tanks are a lot harder to kill, right? You have to drive 3 rounds into the head, I think, to kill, or 1 scatter in a body shot.
If you're damage boosted, it's only 1 scatter or 2 headshots.
Okay. Sounds about right.
I actually have a clip where
go ahead.
I had a Sonic Arrow stuck on a bubble, Winston bubble. I was fighting a Tracer, and the Tracer blinks past me to the edge of the bubble at the same time as the bubble timer runs out. It gets headshotted by the Sonic Arrow.
Oh, it's so
very
good.
nice. What about using your Sonic Arrow in conjunction with your ultimate? I know that both of those can be quite strong together, since you're able to see the enemy team through walls, and then you can surprise them with an ultimate from an interesting angle. Do you sometimes use those two in conjunction?
I pretty much only use my ultimate if I have a sonic arrow up, because you can actually still change the direction where you're shooting your ultimate after you start casting it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
say the whole enemy team is behind a wall, you're going to start using the ultimate. The enemy team will instantly react. They will start running to one direction. Then you just flick the ultimate to the direction where they start going.
Yeah,
I've seen this a lot too.
that makes a lot of sense. I know that, and let's talk about the ultimate. This is a good lead-in into Hanzo's ultimate over here. But I've noticed that one of the preferred ways for good Hanzos to use the ultimate is wait for the enemy team to be in some sort of close quarters, right? Like they're crossing a room or a hallway or a choke point of some sort. Hanzo sonic arrows, they see pretty much everyone they can see, and then they choose a very awkward angle. Like they'll usually try to pick a position where enemies would never expect an enemy to come from, right? Like a back wall or a wall that doesn't lead like really to anywhere. But with Hanzo, you can kind of like sometimes get behind them and just shoot them through that wall. So the enemies are like, where is it coming from? Next thing they know, it's like right behind them, crossing through all of them and getting a bunch of kills. Do you have any tips in regards to the ultimate? How do you like using it? Do you usually try to use it as soon as possible, or do you save it for specific situations?
People like I'm known for my horrible ultimates with Hanzo because I just shoot them as fast as possible, pretty much. But like for example, if there's a Winston with his ultimate up, like he's just jumping around, if I would deal the whole 1000 damage to the Winston and kill him, I would get 70% of my ultimate back.
Dang.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's insanely fast to get your ultimate back. And back when you got your ultimate charge even faster, a Winston would give you a whole full ultimate. But technically Winston still gives you a whole full ultimate if you scatter the normal Winston and then he ults and then you go for, let's say, 4 headshots. 100% ultimate charge.
Nice.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen
so
the
it's
Hanzo's
kind of
build it
feast or
super
famine.
fast. Yeah.
But like that, if you're damage boosted, that killing a Winston like that, it's going to be about 40% ultimate charge for the Mercy as well.
Yeah, now the Mercy doesn't actually register the ultimate charge though until damage is applied or until the kill is registered? Because I always thought it was kill registry is what gives you ult charge if you're damage boosting
It's
something.
right when you deal damage.
Okay. So it's a little bit more when the kill's registered then, right?
Yeah. Like for example, if you get a 6-man Graviton combo, you use the dragon on the Graviton, and the enemy team uses Zenyatta ultimate, then the Mercy is going to get a full ultimate out from the combo.
Dang.
Nice. We actually
I
have
need
a
to start
question.
doing this more.
Yeah, we have a question here that relates exactly to that from Secret Pilgrim. He says, as a Mercy player, having trying to boost Hanzo's ult, do you see this as very helpful, or do you think that the ult just doesn't need the boost? I mean, everything could always use a boost, in my opinion. But what do you think, Arrge?
I think, especially like let's say in 2 or 3 years when the Overwatch gameplay and meta gets to the next level, it's like you might have a comp where you have a really good Ana who is taking care of all the healing, and then the Mercy only focuses on just damage boosting people, because damage boosting is pretty much free ultimate charge out from thin air that you wouldn't normally get. So it's free value for the team. You just get a whole free res from only damage boosting, while the Ana gets more nano boost since she's
Yeah. The real question is how is this going to be affected, right? Because of the Mercy changes. I think that a lot of our responses this episode are going to be kind of on the cusp of being.
Well, the boost is still going to be
something that
there.
actually happens,
right?
Well, what I mean is the functionality of the impact of what's going to happen. Because what happens is you can basically get the damage boost, like Arrge is saying here, and then when you pop Valkyrie, you can engage with that, where you're pocketing everyone. And then Ana can actually go full purple mode and basically just wait until her bio grenade's up, pop Valkyrie, pocket the whole team, and then you can kind of just right and left click, like we talked when we had Little Menace on for the Mercy show, where you wait until you kind of like time your shots with basically forcing Hanzo or Arrge, if you're playing it, you basically just keep firing even if you don't really think you're going to do it, so that Mercy can time the right click, because it's a group like damage boost, group heal. And then you have everything in purple that you need to target in the fight with the grenade from Ana. There's so many different dynamic solutions for the issue, right? Because you can play way more aggressive. You have a 10-second faster respawn timer on the res. So you can play even further aggressive, and Mercy can pull really far back, dive in, res, dive out. It's so much different in how we have to basically rethink combination with Mercy plus another support and the damage boost, like we're talking about the show. And so I wanted to make sure that we highlight that kind of on the cusp as we're talking kind of in between metas here, because this is just some crazy impact of stuff that we're going to talk about here.
That was actually what I was practicing with when I was playing with this Mercy main since season 1 for a couple of seasons. Like, you only need to damage boost when the arrow actually hits someone, so you can keep healing and then switch to damage boost when I release the arrow to get the ultimate shot from the arrow as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're used to playing with a Pharah, it's the same scenario. Anything that has a projectile, you can do this. You can do this with Genji. You can do this with Hanzo. You can do this with Mei. You can do this with Junkrat. Junkrat's a lot harder because you actually have to wait for a bounce or wait for somebody to get impacted. So it's a little bit more tricky. But if the Junkrat is timing it correctly, then you can kind of just adjust to his shots. But there was a question that I wanted to ask about Dragon Strike, or rather address from some basics standpoint. If you are wall climbing and you have any arrow queued, which means if you hold the right click or you hold your primary fire, or sorry, your left click on PC, your primary fire on console, and it's a Sonic, a Scatter, or even a Dragon Strike, and you're holding it and you're ready to pop it, you can climb the wall and then release. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, or I guess it would be like 2 months ago when they made this adjustment. Mm-hmm. So basically lets you kind of Sonic arrow an area, and then you can be like, oh snap, there's a Widow up there and I'm like below them and they don't know I'm here, so I can queue up an arrow, wall climb, and then just like scatter them, and they're just like, holy crap, a Hanzo just jumped in front of me, and boom, they're dead, you know? So you have that whole thing. And then the Dragon Strike, like you were talking about Arrge, with it going kind of like through walls, through areas, and you can adjust it. If you hit the initial arrow, there's a set like travel distance that's really short before the arrow explodes into the dragons. And that set distance is where the window of time for you to eat it with D.Va or deflect it with Genji. But also within that range, if you're hitting a wall, it will just automatically trigger the dragons way sooner. If you shoot it straight into a wall, that's when the dragons blow up. So what I've been able to do is
doesn't work.
Go ahead.
Anymore.
Oh, they changed that.
It was, I think it was just a bug that it would start the dragon right away when you hit a wall, and they changed it back after like a couple of days. But like it was too overpowered because you had no time to react to the dragon. You were right. You had a wall.
Immediate dragon in your face.
Also, cool thing that you can do with the ultimate is that you can wall climb while using the ultimate.
What?
So, like, normally you're standing still when you use the ultimate, but if you use the ultimate and wall climb at the exact same time, you're going to keep climbing up as you cast the dragon.
Really?
So it's an animation.
I didn't know that either.
Technically, it's not an animation cancel since you will keep you will do the animation, but you will be just wall climbing at the same
Right.
time.
So do you like
It's just okay.
do you jump towards the wall and Q midair, or do you press Q and then jump into the wall, or like how does that work?
It's you press Q and like space at the same time when you're against the wall, so that you press the ultimate and you initiate the wall climb at the exact same time.
Gotcha. Oh, I gotta try that out because
That sounds dirty.
one of the small weaknesses of the ultimate is that it does kind of leave you vulnerable for a couple of seconds. If there's a Tracer or a Genji or even sometimes like a McCree around you when you're trying to ult, is you have a slight moment where you're incredibly vulnerable. You're standing completely still. You can't really move anywhere. This is like the perfect time for a Tracer to unload her entire clip on your face. So being able to, in those situations, mitigate that and not being completely immobile, I think is pretty useful.
You could
All right.
also just sonic arrow. Like when you see someone coming from behind a wall, you could just shoot the arrow through the wall, like the ultimate arrow through the wall to headshot the person who's coming from behind a wall, before he even peeks.
You are just full of these little tips, aren't you? I didn't know that either.
So re-listen to this.
The arrow can go through the wall before it explodes into the dragon. That's what you're saying.
And the wall climb while ulting is also good when there's a diva on the enemy team right behind the wall where you're going to ult, and when the diva hears that you're casting the ultimate, he's immediately going to turn his matrix towards the sound. But if you're wall climbing at the same time, you're going to be above the matrix and dodge the matrix that way.
I think I saw you do this on stream where you dodged this diva that was basically matrix straight at you, but you just wall climbed a little bit and then ulted from on top of her, and you got like the two people that were behind the diva, and I thought that was pretty clever.
That's so dirty. Like, so this is really random, hyper advanced tip, but do you know what it's like on the end of the diva? Like when you're doing this, does the sound from Hanzo doing the Ryuga Gawateki Okurao, like when you do that, does that sound travel to a vertical frame? You know how you're traveling, you're moving through space.
It's too hard.
Or is it from the initial shot?
I think it's just like from where the Hanzo is standing, but I've never actually seen a diva who managed to block my ultimate if I was wall climbing at the same time. Like the diva doesn't expect you to out from above and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like direction, like left, right, behind, or in front is really easy to tell by sound, but height, I think that's really hard to tell. Like I don't know any players that can tell if a Hanzo is slightly above him or slightly below them just by sound, though.
Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, I know when people are like walking above me in the church, or like when they're in the basement, I can hear the footsteps.
Right, but
headphones on.
It's
right?
more
like
based
you can tell
on.
that, but like
it's more based on like the layout of the map, right? Like you can probably deduce they're on top of you because you hear them, but you don't really like see them at that level, maybe.
Sure. Okay, we got one more question, I think, before we back into the news about the reporting system from Jeff Kaplan. But let's talk about just like, I think, generic positioning and approaches with engagement and disengagement. So Arrge, you have the floor. You can talk about whatever you like here. Kind of just like teaching us where do you want to be in general. I mean, it's really tough when you don't have specific situations because it varies so much on the map, right? But like, you want to just try your best here? I know this is kind of a very vague question.
Well, like I said, it's really dependent on the enemy team's composition as well. Let's say the enemy team is not running any heroes that can get to a high ground, then you should go there. But if the enemy team is running, let's say, Diva, Genji, Winston, if you're alone on a high ground, then you can't get healed. You're going to die when you get dived. So it all depends on how much your team is willing to help you and what the enemy team is picking. And then, of course, there's some cool spots in every map, which are always useful. But let's say you're being pocketed by Mercy. You should always be on the front line. You should try to absorb damage since you're pretty much taking one healer for yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the oh, go ahead.
If the enemy team is going full dive to counter the pocketed Hanzo, then you should be on the high ground and jump down when they jump at you. That way, they can't all just shoot at you at the same time and get past the healing that Mercy provides.
Do you find yourself kind of like when you have those high grounds you're trying to contest? Because sometimes, like you were saying, Genjis will like to take the high ground away from you, so then it becomes a battle for space, right? Do you find yourself constantly abusing the wall climb with the cue of the arrow to kind of like contest them off of that and make sure you're putting pressure on other enemies?
Yeah, like for example, if it's a Winston jumping to the high ground to contest me alone, then I usually just instantly jump down, but actually just start climbing back up. But the Winston will just jump down after me, and then I'm on the high ground. He has to wait until his jump cooldown goes off. But
gotcha. So you're just playing time cooldowns.
You can actually keep grabbing onto the ledge without ever standing on any ground. Like you can indefinitely keep holding the ledge by just climbing it up and then falling back down and then taking hold of the ledge again. So if there's people that can shoot you on the high ground, you can kinda hide behind the high ground without dropping down. It's kinda hard to explain.
I know what you're talking about, and I actually like Genjis do this too, and it's a common trick that people that can wall climb do to avoid getting damage, right? Like let's say you're at the same level as somebody who's shooting at you, but it's in the high ground. You can drop yourself and like wind up the arrow and then climb yourself back up. So basically, you let yourself drop and climb back up. And during that time, you can't be shot at, right? Because they lose visibility on you. During that time, you can wind up your arrow. And when you're back up into their level, you can keep shooting. And you can keep repeating this like often. Like Genjis will do it, for example, on control points. I've seen him when they're the only ones left on the point and there's like a precipice right next to it, like on Nepal. On the Sanctum one, for example, where is that like inner battleground with a precipice right next to it, a lot of Genjis will just kind of like dance around that wall and shoot shurikens as they climb up and down while avoiding bullets, and that can be a great way to dodge with Hanzo too.
Like you can also like there is this animation where you grab a hold of the ledge, like the corner of the high ground, and pull yourself up. You can actually cancel that midway and then start the same animation instantly again. So that way you're like not on the low ground, you're not on the high ground, you're just technically holding on to the corner of the ledge, like the corner of the high ground.
So now that you mentioned that, I actually
jump button.
Yeah, like you release the jump button, you press, like you try to walk backwards a bit, and then you press space again when you drop down a bit to grab a hold of the ledge again. You can just do it indefinitely.
Interesting.
You only need to touch ground if you want to wall climb again, but you can.
Let me ask you a question regarding that actually, because I've always had this question. I've never been able to figure it out myself. And maybe you know, but when you're wall climbing as Hanzo, and this might be the case with the Genji too, sometimes when you reach the edge of the wall climb, like when you're about to like pull yourself up, sometimes the character will just kind of like pull himself up using his hands and kind of like be right there. Other times you can do like a little jump after you do the wall climb. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Little jump. You mean like? Oh yeah, like you kind of release the wall climb, or like the ledge climbing animation.
Yeah. Like if you release it sooner, your
get...
character does like a jump. If you hold it all the way, you just like pull yourself up. Do you sometimes use these of any sort, or is this mostly like, you know, what ends up happening?
I pretty much always release it a bit early so that I do a small jump.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's much harder for the enemy on the high ground to headshot me if I keep just going upwards instead of landing on top of the high ground, you know?
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's like the whack-a-mole. Little moles just like whack a Hanzo.
Yeah, can you shoot the Hanzo before he goes down again?
Yeah. Man, Arrge, I feel like we have so much more ground that we can cover because Hanzo just has so many adjustments that he has to make when you're playing. Like you were saying, with the enemy team, with the high grounds, you're one of the few heroes that lacks a lot of mobility and yet still has mobility to go vertical. So Hanzo's super interesting, and maybe in the future we get some more Hanzo changes, we'll give you a ring and bring you back.
Yeah, we might have to bring you back again for some more tips because we are running a little bit out of time, but there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you'll have us, we'll talk a little bit more about some toxicity issues with Jeff Kaplan. So I'll do a quick recap here to bring you up to speed. So if you've followed any of the internet memes, hopped on Twitter, or even just watched what people are saying with Blue Post, Jeff Kaplan talks to a toxic forum poster and quote unquote is supposed to have destroyed this poster. And basically, this guy's like, lol, I got banned for, or I got silenced for somebody being disruptive in quick play, lol. And Kaplan was saying, actually, you have over 2,000 complaints. You're silenced for almost 3 years, and you have 3 gameplay suspensions, 7 silences, and a GM account. Or I'm sorry, not a Grandmaster account. This is a general like moderating account. Has a manual account suspension for massive griefing on this dude. So basically, the internet rejoiced, but a lot of people were finding some issues with this, and Kaplan actually responded to the second response, which is, wow, this guy isn't even permabanned because he has over 2,000 reports, right? So I'll kind of give you some highlights here, and then we can discuss it. But the big things are the following. And let me tell you what, the closing statements, I'm going to read the entire final statement because it is right up in my jam, and I almost cried with happiness with this one. So basically, Jeff says, quote, pretty soon, we hope for silences to go away altogether and have only suspensions and bans for punishments, with a few exceptions like forcing battle tag changes for name violations. The second thing, in the short term, so he basically has 3 things. He has short term, long term, and midterm. So short term, been testing an email notification system to let you know when your report has been actioned. Basically, if your report has a result that actually happens, thanking you and letting you know we're doing something. Second short term, they actually just banned, quote, a number of accounts for boosting in Season 5. These accounts were actioned earlier, either yesterday, this would actually be about 3 days ago as of this recording on the 1st of September, but are in the process of being actioned right now. They will also lose all Season 5 rewards in addition to being banned.
There you go, Arrge.
Next steps.
You better be careful boosting, doing all those mercy boosts. There, people are getting banned.
Double boosts are going to get you in trouble.
That's not the kind of boost we're really talking about, though. I don't want to confuse anyone. Yeah. We're talking about like artificially boosting your SR or lowering your SR to take advantage of the system.
Yes. And boosting is also defined by having a higher tier player have another account that purposely decays down to maybe 3K. That's like, let's say your GM or a Masters level player kind of decays, boom, 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 through losing, throwing, basically just having some bronze player playing in your account, whatever it is, and then you drop your account SR, and then you play with somebody of a lower tier within the 1,000 range or 500 range buffer, and then you play together, effectively just carrying teams over and over and over again and quote unquote boosting a lower tier player to a higher tier. That is equivocating to boosting and should not be done. And I know that there's a lot of people that have a very gray area on this. And personally, I've played with some higher tier players here and there on secondary accounts in Diamond. But let me tell you, like, this is not the generic practice. Like, it's not, you do not abuse the system and they will find you out. I've only done this in a couple avenues with people when I'm within the range of just a couple games, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not trying to dismiss what I've said, but I'm saying that this is now going to be a hyper focus, and you need to be even more careful that this is not happening within your games.
Right.
So don't go on any 30-game win streaks in duo queue, basically.
And this is not only just like, don't play with your high-ranked friends, right? Like, I don't think that this means this. It's people who are like really going out of their way to artificially boost themselves, and it creates a bunch of weird stuff. It's not fun for other people involved and stuff, but this doesn't really mean like, hey, if you're in plat and you have a friend in high diamond, you can't play together. This doesn't mean that. Yeah,
you just have to be careful, because if you do something that could trigger this new system, you might be in big trouble, right? Like, even if it is innocent playing with somebody that's a little bit better than you, and you just go on a 20-game win streak, they're probably going to take a look at that within the medium timeline. Okay, so let's go to the next one before we run out of time here. So the next steps, medium timeline, we're looking to completely ban repeated competitive offenders, meaning if you're banned for more than X seasons, we will ban you from ever playing competitive ever again. For season 6, we're going to be way more aggressive with boosting and throwing, or any other sort of SR manipulation type gameplay that is qualified under griefing. Quote, as a part of increasing punishments, we are looking to make it so that offenders get blocked from competitive play much sooner, and more details will be coming out as we get closer on this. And to parse with that, they said that there's a developer update video coming during season 6, hopefully within the next couple weeks. I would actually predict between 2 to 3 weeks, maybe less, of another developer update rolling in with some of the toxicity throwing, boosting, and reporting system rolling out, because I know that there is also a soft patch that came with season 6 launch that noted in the consoles that you were getting a little bit more reporting system tools again. And the final statements, and the best statement, I'll just read this verbatim from the Blue Post. In the long term, we really want to work on systems that encourage positive behavior and reward good players. It really bums us out to spend so much time punishing people for being bad sports. We like making cool, fun game systems. That's what we do for a living. But because people seem to lack self-control, or because people like to abuse the anonymity and free speech, we're put into this position of spending a tremendous amount of our time and resources policing this community. We will do this as it is our responsibility, but we'd like to spend more time rewarding good players rather than having to focus on poor sportsmanship and unacceptable bad behavior so much. Like it or not, this is a, quote, us, the Overwatch community problem, and not just a Overwatch team problem. For better or for worse, we're in this together. So I really like how Jeff wrapped the tie on the gift of basically their resources now dedicated to this. It's kind of like said, it's kind of the final straw, and we have to dedicate way more of our resources than we were currently because people can't behave. It's kind of like you're put in a position of privilege, and if you can't handle this, then we're taking away the cookie jar because you can't handle not eating sweets before dinner. Kind of.
I love Jeff. I really like that he did this response because it's very true, right? Like, sure, everybody is giving Blizzard a hard time for the toxicity, for all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, Blizzard is not the one being toxic. they're just providing the game. It's really, you know, the community who sometimes gets a little rattled up and, you know, sometimes goes like too far into like the toxic realm. It is up to us to kind of like hone it down a little bit and be like, hey, let's just be cool with each other. Let's enjoy the game. Let's play. I know that tensions sometimes run high because there's so many expectations with a game like this, and people are very invested in games like this. But at the end of the day, it can't really just make us savages just playing this game kind of thing. Arrge, do you have any comments on this? I know that as a Hanzo main, you probably have encountered some toxicity here and there. What do you think of all these changes?
But toxicity, why would anyone hate on a Hanzo main?
Oh yeah, you haven't encountered any of this. You've been lucky enough to dodge all of it.
He's just saying he's good so he doesn't get any hate. That's what happens.
But there's actually an unbelievable amount of hate towards me. And like, for example, I was top 400, I think, and I had a top 11 player in my team. And he didn't even say anything. He just picked Junkrat instantly after I picked Hanzo. And just was half AFK the whole match. And afterwards he said that why would he even try to win when he has a Hanzo in his team? Like, he was legit top 11, but he still threw the game because I was in his team.
EU or NA, I have to ask.
EU, of course.
Well, I didn't want to like protrude any stereotypes, I guess, but yeah. I do think that I've even run into this in NA, but I feel like most of the toxic players are actually outside of top 500 and outside of GM in most cases.
I mean, you never know, though. They're definitely up there sometimes, too.
There are some, yeah, exactly. I mean, I ran into somebody today, and I play off hours. Okay, so probably what you're used to when you jump on NA, right? Because you're in EU off hours, and I'm in Japan off hours. And this guy, no joke, before the game started, less than 10 seconds, he's already all chatting, GG, well played. We're going to lose because this guy picked Torb and Junkrat on Hollywood defense, which is actually really solid defense, right? And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I was like, are you this toxic always before games? Like, before we actually start playing and see what people do? And he's just like, these guys are throwing, blah, 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 blah. I was like, it sounds like you're like just giving up. And like, I was actually like trying to perpetuate this because I just wanted to have a good, clean game. I don't care if I win or lose. It's just placements, right? And no joke, after they won, this guy's an Anime. After we finished pushing the payload, he goes on another rant and rave and basically calls them dirty Korean and then uses the N-word. And it's just like, this guy is beyond the realm of toxicity. This guy is like in a whole nother realm of just rage. I was like, this guy is beyond salt mines. This guy is like down in the sulfur in the core of the earth that's just made out of NaCl. Like, I have no clue how people can get this angry over people just insta-picking things and playing them pretty well. Like, the guy was a good player, but the fact that we need tilt and the game starts and then every time you die, you're like smashing your keyboard, it's just not helpful for anyone, especially you.
Yeah, like enjoy the game. I don't see like no reason to like make yourself so bitter and like try to make the people around you like bitter as well. Like, now that we're exchanging stories, I had one yesterday on my account as I was doing my placements on my team.
Sure.
There was two master players. There was this guy, this other guy, and me, and we were duoing together, and the rest of our team was all diamonds from the previous season. And this guy in our team, he got so toxic because like we were not outright winning the game. We were kind of like struggling a little bit. It was very back and forth. It was, I think, on Lunar Colony, and it went into the second round. Like, we both capped the point. It took us some time to cap the point, but we basically went into the second round, and they had to attack once and they would win. And this guy had been just giving us crap the entire match. At the end of the day, we end up winning the round. They were not able to successfully attack, and because they couldn't, we still had like a little bit more of a percentage on the first point. and we take the map, we win it. But then this guy starts being like, oh, I can't believe that it took 2 master players to defeat a bunch of diamonds and stuff. And he was like super mad. And I'm like, dude, we won. We won. Like, what more do you want? And then I guess he was mad because we had 2 masters in our team and we didn't steamroll the other team. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, don't you want fair games? Like, this is supposedly how it should go, right? Like, it was a very back and forth, very interesting game. There were a lot of plays, there were a lot of switching and stuff. But this guy just had resorted to complaining the entire match. And like, even though we won at the end, he was still complaining. And it's like, why do you want to spend your time doing this? Like, you got your competitive points. We won the match. We're all happy over here. We even got like a really cool game. Like, why don't you just focus on enjoying the game and improving yourself rather than like telling everyone else that they should be better?
I think the most common reason why people throw in my games is because we don't push the payload all the way to the end, or because we push it too slowly. And that for some reason just instantly makes some people give up.
Yeah, I feel
it's
like some people
the level of things you get angry for gets so much more into the minutia the higher you get. Because like down in like silver and gold, people are upset. It's like, oh my gosh, protect our mercy. And then like you get into like GM and top 500, like, we didn't push the payload 30 seconds faster. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. You know what I mean?
I just think that the expectations need to lower down a little bit. Like, I feel like some people jump into competitive and they're expecting all of their teammates to play like, I don't know, freaking Envious or like Lunatic High or something. Like, they're expecting their teammates to be all pro players. They expect everyone to pick a 2-2-2 composition every time. They want 2 healers, 2 tanks, 2 DPS. If their DPS, if their Genji's not getting like 6 kills when they Dragon Blade, then they're not doing their job, kind of thing. And like, people need to relax and lower their expectations a little more. You're queuing up with 5 random strangers online. You probably never have talked to them before. There's a big chance you've never played with them before, and that you will never play with them again. And you have to kind of come together and make something happen with this like group of people. And mistakes will be made at all levels of the meta. People will screw up their ultimates. People will miss their shots. People will get killed here and there. Like, that stuff is just going to happen. You're going to have to sweat for some games. You know, they're not going to be handed to you in a silver platter. Some games that you are losing terribly might still be won. And like, it's just like this attitude where something slightly goes wrong and people flip their table and they're like, oh, this team sucks. There's nothing we can do here. But the reality is that, you know, the other team has equal chances of messing up too. And if you give up so early and you lose the faith on your team so early because of small things like that, you're just setting up your team for failure. And like, honestly, more than the people who make a mechanical mistake or people who are maybe like not as good as the game, I think the people who throw games are those who outright refuse to cooperate or play together just because somebody in their team did something that wasn't pro level.
Yeah, the other side of the coin too, I'll speak to, as watching both Arrge, and I even watched some people interact with Jardio, who's our May guy, and PvP, and the Destro for Torb. People just really get upset when something they don't like works, and there is no saving grace there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just not going to convince them.
Yeah, pride.
And the other side is like, you have to recognize stubborn people as not always being toxic, but if you hit like even the right 2 buttons, you may flip that player into a whole nother area you didn't want to flip them. You know what I mean? So you have to be very careful in how you deal with stubborn players, and you also have to be careful to not be too stubborn, right? So Arrge, would you like to wrap us up and how to properly be stubborn on Hanzo? Because when when you're stubborn, sometimes you have to be stubborn in the fact that you know your own capabilities well enough to know that you're going to carry or you're going to do what you need to do. And if you don't, then you're going to switch.
Well, for example, if you're asking for heals, always remember to say please in a really nice voice afterwards. And it's much safer to not make any calls as Hanzo, because I've actually noticed that a lot of people will instantly get mad if a Hanzo is making calls, because you know you're not playing for the team, you're just a toxic Hanzo main. So a lot of people actually will just do the exact opposite. Like if I say that, please, let's not push forward, we have 2 people dead, the mad toxic dude might just run into the enemy team spawn just to spite me.
Well, yeah, because what would this Hanzo know about the game, right? He's playing Hanzo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. You have to be careful as well. Like I've noticed that when I perform less optimally, I have to remove myself more from the coaching role and let somebody else take over or just go silent, like radio silence. Because the more you talk with players that are openly observing you getting picked or openly observing you getting in trouble, then it's like every death is you going down another notch on their trust level, right? And if you start out on Hanzo, you're starting out at 1, you know, and that's a good day. So, yeah. How do you deal with it though? You know what I mean? When you do get the toxic players, when you do get the hate, how do you deflect? How do you just adjust? Do you do what, you know, I Can't Hear You does, where you just don't join team chat, you just peace out? Do you listen to calls? How do you do it in a streaming environment, especially, right?
I mean, there's like a lot of toxic games in a row, I usually just don't join voice chat at all to not risk getting more tilted, and try to just get a relaxing match. And I'm actually I'm not that good at dealing with toxicity, especially
it's hard.
at the beginning of my streaming career. I would get really mad, but I do my best to not get like infected by the toxicity and spread it to other people in the next games. But
that's a good point.
I think my biggest weakness is that if someone is toxic towards me, I'm going to be toxic back. Really bad at holding my mouth, you know, not saying anything back.
It's human nature, right? Like when you're getting attacked, you feel like you have to defend yourself and sometimes attack back. But then again, it creates this feedback loop of negativity that it's not getting you anywhere, right? Like suddenly it stops being about the game and trying to win and working together, and stops being about like, how can I make this person's life miserable right now? Like you stop wanting your teammates to win at that point, and like I don't know, that's an attitude that leads nowhere. It makes you hate your team, makes you hate that particular game. It might make you hate Overwatch in general. So I don't know.
Even they make you hate yourself.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No, honestly. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. There's been days or sessions where I've been playing Overwatch, and you just run into a really bad streak of teammates that, whew, you close the game and you go outside, you look out into the horizon, and you wonder, man,
the eclipse.
Yeah, you're like, what is humankind doing right now? You know, it kind of depresses you a little bit. Yeah. But you know, like that feeling goes away and you get back into the game and stuff. And not saying that every game is like this. I've had games where I've had really fantastic teammates I've gelled with. They're not trying to prove anybody wrong. You know, they're not prideful, or their egos are not high up in the sky. And those games are fantastic and super enjoyable. It's thankfully Blizzard is doing a lot to move more towards having more of those games. And I do think that hopefully as a community we can, come together and being like, okay, guys, we don't need to be this mean to one another. There's 30,000 or 30 million people playing this game. They're all at different levels. I never truly know who I'm going to get. I know that I'm going to get people around my range, but I don't know what's going on with their days, with their lives, their situation. And I'm just going to try to do my best in each game that I play and hopefully, slowly climb myself up.
I couldn't have said it better myself, but I think it's time to start closing out the show with our usual bits on iTunes reviews, special thanks, promos, and a little bit of a promo for the Discord. So let's start with iTunes reviews. We got 2 iTunes reviews this last week from Nesta29219 and Techno Free Ride. And we don't do this very often, but I want to read this one on the show because it was such a well thought out review, and I really appreciate him putting the time and effort into this. And it's not so much to, I guess, be on public display as much as it is just like, I really appreciate this guy, like, gets it. And I'll just say it. So he says, come enjoy the lab rats. Omnic Lab is the pinnacle of Overwatch podcast, deserves your attention if you are striving for greatness. The 2 hosts, Rob and Andres, provide in-depth analysis for game characters and their abilities. I have been a faithful listener since the beginning of the year. This podcast excels in booking fantastic guests who get into the weeds regarding the gameplay. As a Zenyatta and Sombra player, I have truly enjoyed the information served up by the Omnic Lab technicians. If you want an edge in Overwatch, you should definitely give this a listen. And Omnic Lab is the benchmark that Overwatch podcasts use. I really appreciate this because this is not me saying this, and it just like really struck a chord with me. And I know Andres Andres is reacting to this live. But yeah, just thank you so much for the kind words. And Nesta, not to disqualify what you said, you summarized what he said. So I mean, I really appreciate everyone that leaves these reviews. But man, that one, like when you get good reviews, it always makes you feel good. But when you get eloquent reviews, it's just like, I really appreciate that a lot, especially when you use the Oxford comma. Let me tell you, makes me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we love all these reviews. It let us know that we're doing good. It let us know that we're on the right track. After all, we are doing this for the community as well. Believe it or not, I was a avid podcast listener, and I always wanted podcasts that would focus on the strategy, on helping me learn the game and stuff. And I'm super happy that now we're getting to do one that actually does that. So we want to keep honest to that and always bring you guys some new strategies, some new guests, people that can enhance your gameplay. It's always super fun talking to them. I learn new stuff from them every time. Like today with Arrge, he already taught me a bunch of new tricks I didn't know with Hanzo. So it's always nice having them on the show.
Yeah, and special shout out to you, Arrge. I know that you're not like Moon or having somebody on like Seagull that just like these bananas numbers for streams, or Tim the Tap Man, but like we like to bring on creators that we enjoy. It doesn't matter the numbers. We like to see you, and we like to see your play, and we get recommendations from other players that we've had on the show and highlight you. So thank you for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking my podcast virginity as well.
Yeah, we're the first. Hey, listen up though. Let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to look you up. What's your Twitch, your Twitter? If people want to get to see you play and all that stuff.
The main place to find me is of course my stream, twitch.tv/Arrge, and then I also have a Twitter at ArrgeOW, and I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Arrge as well. And that's actually how I started this streaming career. I was making YouTube videos first and then started streaming.
Nice. And for those of you who don't know, you spelled it ARRGE, kind of like RG, but you pronounce it Arrge.
Yeah.
Because you are indeed from... You said Finland,
the land
right?
of the press.
Hydraulic press.
Hydraulic press. There you go.
Hydraulic press. That's it. Very cool. And if you guys want to find all the content and you forget everything, don't worry about it. I'll put it in the show notes for you on the website, as well as the description under Arrge, underneath Rob and Andres in the Omnic Lab links. And this is the time where we like to thank our special diamond sponsors, as well as those of you who are supporting us on Patreon. We have Ben W., Hannibal Snowden, Lysol, Magic, Michael Kritz, Not Muad'Dib, RC Crispy, Sketchy Nonsense Podcast, Tragic Zach, and Trinium, bringing it in hot. We actually had a few of our diamond sponsors have to drop down out of their tier or even out of their support as a whole this last month or last couple months because of various reasons. Usually it has to do with finances. It's a huge commitment. So that's why we always thank these guys for having the slot. It means the world to us to have you guys supporting. And these guys are like doing some insane work of like giving us that level of commitment. And we have 2 new patrons at any level. We always announce them. We have Neil B and Kay Shihan. Thank you guys so much for joining the crew of lab scientists. We really appreciate your support. And our support has fluctuated quite a bit down over the last 2 months. And it's not something that we are worried about. We deeply appreciate anything that you guys throw our way. But we wanted to make sure that you're aware of what's going on in our escape to let you know that we're really actually still quite dependent on this for our upcoming 2 months of September and October into November for basically covering costs for BlizzCon. We're basically made the call once we hit the initial goal of 250 an episode is kind of the staple. Once we hit that, we were like, okay, I think we can finance BlizzCon. And if we dip too far low, I'm already committed to it, but it's going to be like a financial thing for me more than Andres. Andres lives in the continental U.S., but it's more or less for me. It's a little high taking that crazy ticket cost. So if you guys would love to support the show, you did your iTunes review, you did your time, you hang out in the Discord, maybe consider throwing us a couple bucks here and there for like a cup of coffee a week or something like that. It's kind of how a lot of people are spinning it. But yeah, head over to patreon.com/OmnicLab if you want to support the show. If you want to find the show anywhere and everywhere, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Patreon, RSS, Google Podcasts, iTunes, everything. All that's at our website, omniclab.com/links. If you want to join the Discord community, type into your browsers, not into Discord apps, discord.me/OmnicLab to find the community. Community is always 24/7 going on. There's people actively looking for groups. There's people looking for anything in quick play to comp to free-for-all deathmatch. And game night is actually today as we're recording. It's September 1st. So we'll give you a little bit of a recap in the future. We're quickly running out of time. But please head over to the community and join us. Andres and I are trying to be more actively involved. If you're a patron, we have a special access to a patron channel. You can actually just ping us whenever, and Andres and I will get it. So even if we don't reply immediately, we are as open and as accessible as we can be so that when we log into Discord, we make you a priority to respond as much as we can. So please feel free to do that. And if you want to reach us out to see what we're doing further, Andres, why don't you let people know where they can find you in the digital space?
Yeah, you can look me up on Twitter at iPlayGames. You spell that IPLAI Games. You can also find my music blog over on SoundCloud. Over at soundcloud.com/iPlayMusic. Again, you spell it IPLAI Music. And check them out. I usually post all of my projects and stuff that I'm up to over there.
All right, and if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram posting really weird things in Japan. I actually went on a Pokemon Go raid this weekend and caught a Suicune.
Nice.
Because that's the Japan one, the very first legendary dog to release in our region, and I got it on day number 1 of the release. So I'm really pumped about that. And you can see more things on the tag Not Rob on Twitter. And on Instagram, you can find my other Hearthstone podcast. If you like Hearthstone stuff, we're actually having our 2-year anniversary show with a special guest, Andrew Brown, who used to be on the show before he started hosting Happy Hearthstone. And we're going to do some secret news Jeoparino. I have not announced this anywhere else, and it's just on the show. I'll make the announcement because we're recording tomorrow, or actually 2 days, on Sunday night, my time, Saturday night, their time. But yeah, super cool stuff coming your way. And last, if you're a creator or you want to kind of just Pick Rob's Brain. I'm doing an episode of Concept Craft about twice a month. I'm kind of making that my general gig on just creator tips and things that hit my fancy to talk about on Content Craft. That website will be conceptcraft.libsyn.com, and you can find the links in the show notes. Thank you guys for tuning in on episode 68. Arrge, you've been a fantastic and Finnish guest. Actually, the best Finnish guest we ever got, and the only Finnish guest we ever got.
Hey.
So, you can feel free to join us. And Arrge is also in our Discord, so jump over there. Don't be a lab rat. Be a scientist. We'll see you guys in the next show. And remember, don't say salty because toxicity will get you. We'll see you guys in the next show. Bye.
Thanks to everyone who came over to the chat. We had a pretty active chat today. Some of them are sad that you didn't get to dab on the chat, Arrge.
Yeah, that's always.
We'll have to get him next time. Next time we gotta get your special dab.
Yeah, I need to get a better webcam.
Hopefully, you get you a good boost for the show, and you can use that sweet ad rev.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, subscribe. This will be on YouTube.